Specs rule. Literally. Let's get into it. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brennan, and this is the podcast all about CA. Today, as you guessed it, we're already talking about specs, and this is what we're going to be going into. And we've talked about specs on the show before, but I've actually brought two amazing experts to the show, both Steve and Dave. And before I let you guys do your official introduction, I just want to let you know that this episode is a milestone episode. This is episode number 25. It's a pretty big deal.
Woohoo!
And yeah, I'm thrilled because again, this started back in September and look where we are. The show's crest just breaking over almost, 2,500 listens for the whole, the show in the respect. It's kind of a cool thing to see this grow over the last, 6 months. So
that's fantastic.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you. But with that said, I want the two of you to introduce yourself. Go for it, Dave.
Who are you pointing at, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm Dave Stutzman, president of Conspectus, independent specifications consulting firm and software company. So software company is something new, but here we are. Yeah. Lots of experience.
We'll touch about that in a minute here.
And I'm Steve Gantner. I'm executive vice president for Conspectus, Dave's business partner, future owner to be. And excited to be here with you, Matt.
Yeah. Awesome. What do you guys do for fun when you're not writing the most amazing things of specs and buildings? What are you guys doing?
Ooh. I'm here in Omaha today. I'm not writing specs, but I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, because CSI's North Central Region Conference is here this week. And I just got finished talking to a bunch of product representatives. So specifiers love talking to product reps because they are the people that keep us going. They know more than we do about specific products, but they make us look good and smart. But aside from that, I like to hang out with my family. I'm married, have 4 kids, and one of my oldest son's married, and he's got a grandson. So just love hanging out with them.
Yeah. Dave, what are you doing on the weekends?
Hey, I'm missing it this weekend, Matt. I'm a bachelor.
Ooh.
Yes.
Tell the stories.
Why? Well, this last week, my daughter gave birth to our 7th grandchild. So now it's her first. Another grandson. He has me so confused due to lack of sleep. I don't know what day of the week it is. Honestly, it's
Friday. It's Friday.
It's been crazy busy. So yeah, my wife is helping out this week as my daughter gets accustomed to someone else in the apartment besides herself.
Well, that's awesome, and congratulations to you, the whole family, and definitely to mom.
Yes, well, thank you.
Very cool. So you mentioned Conspectus, and I really wanted to get into that. What is it? Tell the listeners, what is this product? What does it do?
The product. The specification, Conspectus Cloud?
Yeah. Kind of what is it?
It's a better way of actually writing specifications. So I created this thing out of frustration, mostly. I mean, what better way to develop software? Trying to solve a problem and trying to make it better for our team. Because initially we made it only for our team. And we wanted to be able to make it a collaborative effort with the entire project team, which is something that none of the other spec writing software really accomplishes, doesn't accomplish it well. So here we are on a new adventure, trying to bring all of the teams together by having conversations in the spec writing software.
Of course, architects, engineers, all using this.
Contractors, suppliers, installers,
owners,
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, it's a tested software because Conspectus, as the service side, of the company's been using it for over 10 years now, and successfully for the past 3 or 4, right, Dave? We had to beta some stuff. So the our subscribers really aren't our beta testers at this point. They're more, hey, it'd be really nice if we could have this. Can you do that? So we're working with them now on that. But
Nice. We
we've
continue to
successfully used
refine
it.
it.
Yeah, refining the product.
Yep. But Steve found a different opportunity also for using Conspectus Cloud.
We're using it as an educational tool. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, Dave. We've actually offered to use it. I'm not allowed to say the name of the university, but it's a large university in St. Louis. There's only 2 to choose from, 3 to choose from, but you might figure it out. They have an architecture school, and we've taught. I've taught a couple classes down there about specification writing, and we've offered it to them to use as their final project, or to write a specification section and to do some TOCs and stuff like that. And I think it's successful. They've enjoyed working with the product, and the end result, we'll wait and see how their final project turns out. But hopefully well.
Oh, very cool. And that must be like, from your guys' standpoint, it must be such a privilege to see these firms, because at the end of the day, they were doing specs by word, and that kind of thing, and seeing the challenges that come with it, and then using this product to deliver a much better end result because things are lining up and RFIs aren't, being generated because of useless stuff, because the specs tool that you've developed basically complete. And that we're going to dive into all that throughout this episode about CA and specs and RFIs and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, very kudos to yourself, because I think that's a very cool accomplishment to kind of sit back and go, yeah, we were part of that, even though you weren't directly in part of it, but you still were.
Yeah, so think about it. You mentioned Word, and that was part of the frustration, because we had built over a lot of years, because I've been at this a long time, built a lot of macros to try to help us with some of the more mundane tasks, and to be able to keep the quality level consistent, project to project, specifier to specifier. And so now the spec system that we develop replicates or even does it better than what Microsoft Word could. So we've replaced all of those macros. We don't need to even rely on them anymore.
Exactly. And like simple things, changing headers or connecting to different product specs. And suppliers are, you're connecting with all the different suppliers, hence why what you're doing right now, Steve. And then you're basically bringing those guys into the package, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I was doing this afternoon was talking to some folks who, I was able to pull out my computer, was talking to Ardex, who is a flooring product below the floor tile manufacturer. So think adhesives, grout, things like that for ceramic tile. And I pulled up our tiling section, and I just kind of walked through it with them step by step, our products that we have listed, and they noticed one that was incorrect. So I was able to jot a quick note down in the software, and it goes off to Elias, and Elias will take a look at that product and make the corrections necessary. And that can be pushed out instantaneously as an update to our sections. So
right.
Cool. It's to make sure that our products are current and industry standards.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's so brilliant, and that really helps, because again, that's where the errors are.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits too. Is we try to, I don't want to say limit, but we try to maintain our manufacturers that we can keep up to date with what they're doing, so that we don't have a long list of products and manufacturers that we have to continually check and make sure they're current. Because like you said, the RFIs are generated because a product may be discontinued, or it may have changed properties a little bit or something like that. We don't always know that. We depend on the project reps to tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us, and that's a great segue to understanding the specifications. So what is what are specifications in context of the construction project, your take on specs? Why are specs so important from you from that? I know what it is, but for the listener, someone that's doing, what is your take? Why is specs the holy grail for the project?
Shall I put it in really easy terms?
You
do yours and I'll do mine.
Okay. So specs are really the recipe for the buildings, for the construction project. You think about it. How many times did you make Toll House cookies? Right? Did you follow a recipe?
Sometimes.
Only sometimes. That's right there on the package. How can you not follow the recipe? And that's the issue. So specifications are the recipe. If you don't follow the recipe, it's likely not going to turn out right.
No.
And if you forgot to put the butter in the Toll House cookies, they're probably way too hard.
That's probably why they didn't taste so good there, Dave.
Well, we use that as an example too when we're talking about specifications, because they're broken into 3 parts, which ironically is who you work for. And if you think about a recipe, you have your instructions, right? Which is part 1. You have your ingredients, which is part 2. And then you have the baking instructions, which is part 3, how to do it. So that's why recipes are the perfect analogy for it.
Right.
The other way you can think about it too, and it is, you play board games, right? So like, let's use Monopoly.
Yep.
You don't know how to play the game until you have the rules, right? Well, we kind of write the rules to how to build the building. So.
Yeah. Can't say I'm a fan of Monopoly. It's just one of those games you just don't play with friends because you won't be friends afterwards.
And it takes
there's always a winner and there's a lot of losers. A dangerous one. Now, with the other type of specs, like there's performance-based, perspective, or prescriptive. What do you prefer? And in through this, and that, again, going back to the recipe, illustration.
That's a tough. It's going to be the lawyer answer. It depends, really, on what the project requires. As far as the easiest spec to write is probably proprietary, because really, what the architect wants on the project, and you just list that one product, and that's all you have to do in part 2. Let's say, for instance, they want a certain type of window. You can specify that manufacturer, that specific window, and you're done. That's all you have to do in part 2.
Yeah. That's how I prefer. Like, because as you're designing the building, you're going through this and this process, and you know exactly what you want at the end. And so I do want that nano wall. I don't want an alternate. I want this particular product, because you've done the homework and you've done the research. You looked at the websites, maybe you've even gone to the showroom. That's how I prefer it, versus just doing a performance base where you don't know what you're going to get at the end of the day. And I'm a particular person. I can't just go out and buy a TV. I got to research the details of the TV. That's why I go with not a performance base.
So yeah, performance is actually the most difficult to write if it's true performance, because you have to set out the criteria. What is the performance you're trying to achieve? How are you going to measure it? What's the criteria by which you're going to judge compliance? And that list can get very, very long. And if you miss something that is critical, you could end up with something that you really don't want, or something that doesn't satisfy the owner's project requirements. There's only really been, I should say there was an experiment that was successful, I believe. It was a California school project where they actually did write performance specifications. And what came out of that, there was no product on the market, but as a result, we ended up with integrated ceilings. Now, many folks today may not even understand what that is, but it was the acoustics, it was the ceiling finish, it was the lighting, it was the air distribution. It was absolutely everything that touched the ceiling integrated into a single system. And that was an innovative solution to a performance specification, because they didn't say that it was going to be a certain acoustic ceiling tile.
Right. And again, it goes back to, hey, I want this, but you kind of got a different interpretation of what you wanted.
And a lot of times you get a combination of the different types of specifications. I mean, you can list a product and then you can list the salient properties of it that you want and allow equivalent products to be submitted in their place. So you combine this different styles of spec writing. Any particular spec can have all different types.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's open up Pandora's box here. What are some common challenges and misunderstanding about specifications?
Every job is the same.
It's just like the last one. We can just reuse the spec from that.
Yes, it's just like the last one, except it's in a different city. It's a different climate zone. Yeah, that's probably the most common misinterpretation, I guess, of specifications.
Yeah, using the one, and you're right. And guilty is charged because that's what we did with the school. Hey, just use the same one. At least we would go through the specs and correct what we got caught on. Right, if there was a change order for this item or whatever, we actually spec'd. We ended up using a Pollock ACM on the building, but the previous Lucobond or whatever, there was a different type of ACM that we used, and then one of our GCs caught it during tender and said, "Hey, this doesn't meet the fire testing based on all this," and it was all due to that. I guess the fire out in Europe or something where it just raw, basically, yeah, what product?
The Grenfell fire.
Yeah,
yes, that was the one because they used a non-fire rated core.
Yeah,
and basically
that's right.
And basically, what happens with non-fire rated core is the plastic. And funny you mentioned that. I just had that presentation with George. The plastic inside between the sandwich panel of aluminum was dripping, and it was dripping as it was on fire. So fire typically will not go down, but in the instance of the Grenfell project, because of the ACM, the plastic was on fire and it fell, and it caught the lower floors on fire, and that's how the fire really spread.
Yeah, no, and when we got brought up to our attention, we had, I think, 8 schools and it got all pulled. And then we basically went to a Pollock because it was the next alternative and it didn't compromise the budgets and it was in line to what was, priced and tendered and everything. And that was the way we did it. But yeah, very frustrating. Lots of sleepless nights going, oh my goodness, what have we done? And not realizing. And even though, they even their language was saying, oh yeah, no, it's been fire tested and everything. And you went into the fine details and you're like, no, it is not. So we just kept going on with that. But with specs and RFIs, now you're going to transition here from, we've talked about, what specs are and why they are, but let's get into the construction administration side and how specs are very, very important into this world. Really the link between design and construction. So to kick off with this question, in your experience, where do you see the biggest disconnect between specifications and how they're interpreted in the field? And how can architects, contractors, even owners work together to bridge this gap?
Ooh.
Loaded question just for you.
That's a really loaded question.
Oh,
Totally.
And Steve is the right person to ask since he was on the CA side for this one. Don't you have a whole ton of examples that you can?
I wish I had one in particular that I could pull up out of memory, but I think the biggest disconnect is reality versus wish. And Dave, help me out here, but and I'm not picking on architects. I'm an architect, but architects see these things that look great in a magazine. Mm-hmm. They don't exactly know where the product comes from, and then they want us to specify it. And it's kind of like I can't specify what I don't completely understand. And then when it comes into the field, we've guessed at it, we've done our best, but it's not quite right. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
I wanted to take it maybe a little bit different direction, but I think the end result is virtually the same. So there's been a phrase that's crept into the design lexicon, and it's design intent or architect's intent. And if you're relying on that, it's really difficult to try to explain an intent, right? And to specify an intent is practically impossible. So if you're trying to rely on that phrase and thinking that the contractor is going to understand what the intent is without it being fully documented, there's going to be a big disconnect somewhere.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into a clarity question too, like why clear specs are so important. And I'm sure you got lots of examples about that in the field too.
Well, go back to your ACM panel. It was only 2 letters that made the difference. So the core was either PE for polyethylene, which will burn, or FR, which is fire resistant.
Yeah.
So, it seems like a very tiny detail, but you get the 2 letters wrong or missing.
Yeah.
And if it's missing, what will the contractor price? Probably the least expensive. Now, we're fortunate 100%. Here in the U.S., I think all the manufacturers don't even offer the polyethylene core anymore.
Right, given the circumstance and the reason, history. Oh, sorry, go for it, Steve.
No, I think after that fire, I don't think they make non-FR fire-rated cores anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like, again, in your real world scenario, any example of some RFIs that were caused by vague specs? Anything that comes to mind where it wasn't quite right or was unclear, and you could sit there and argue back and forth with the contractor and the architect and vice versa, or yourself.
Probably myself.
I want to go to the first one I think of is I was asked to do a quality assurance review on a project, it was a housing project. And you would think by listening to what I'm going to say that I'm making all of this up, but this is absolutely true. No names, because it would be way too embarrassing. But the architect asked us to do the review, and the very first question I asked, because they were only interested in us having to review the building enclosure specifications. And I asked her why. And the response was, well, we completed the specifications in about 4 hours. Now, this is for a multifamily housing project, wood frame, several hundred units. And what I found was that the specification really didn't even match the project. So, little things like the drawings might have shown aluminum windows. The specifications identified the windows as a composite, but when I read the specification, neither aluminum nor composite were included. They were all vinyl. So now, what does a contractor do in a case like this? Because vinyl would be the least expensive, right? So does he just rely on the spec and say, hey, you said the spec was about composite, you specified vinyl, so I can give you vinyl? Or does he stop and ask a question?
And not necessarily ask the question, because they're going to go down to the cheapest product typically, right? But I think that's where is your take. Specs rule. They're what governs the contract. Oh, I see Steve's already kind of jumping at this. He's ready to, take on the question. Steve. Go for it. It's yours.
So there is that misconception. But to go back to your previous question, I think most RFIs generated because of specifications are because there's an inconsistency between the drawings and the specifications. And there was a miscommunication or non-communication between the drawing person and the specifier. And what I mean is they may have made a late minute change to the drawings and not told the specifier, or the specifier may have assumed something that they didn't confirm with the drawings. So I think that's where most RFIs between specs and drawings are generated.
Just to follow on that, Steve, too, the other thing that can cause the RFIs is if the folks creating the drawings begin to label the product by a specific type, because it may not be the type that's specified. In this case, aluminum windows. Instead of just calling it an aluminum, which they could have called it a window instead of saying aluminum window, and then relied on the spec for what that window is supposed to be. So too much information on the drawings can often create conflicts as well.
Or even worse, they named the window product on the drawing.
On the drawings, yeah. Because that's where you want them to go back to the spec.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll keep going. All right, fine, I'll go. But is there something that in other good practices like that, like, that you would, offer out and saying, hey guys, don't do this. I've seen this too many times in the job. One thing I've learned really quickly on is don't put quantities in your specs. That's a no, because the drawings in my past will show that you have X amount of basketball hoops, but if the specs call a different number or different quantity, you're in trouble. Or same thing, bleachers, call out so many numbers and contractor provide 200 bleachers. Oh, that was from our old little addition spec. This is a brand new school. It clearly it's not 200 seats. It's 1,000 seats or something like that.
Let's look at something that could have a wide ranging effect. Door hardware. You don't want to tell them numbers of hinges in the spec. It would be in the schedule itself. So
right.
And there are other things with door hardware that could have catastrophic effects on the cost of a project.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just one little thing. It's a big, you know what I mean? That's a big extra, and it's tough to justify, like, as an owner and everything too. You want to see the project go ahead, and to see that something like that's missed, it's not going to be a couple dollar change. It's going to be up there in the 100,000, maybe even $1 million, depends on where it is. So going to, the comment of the specs were, delivered in 4 hours. How many change orders were on that job?
If they didn't fix what I found, and found only because I only checked the enclosure, if they didn't fix that, there would have been, I don't know, several hundred questions.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been studies done. I mean, there was one that I found. It was done by Navigant over 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago now. And in that study, they looked at projects around the world, all sizes, all scales. And the conclusions they came to were 800 RFIs per project, average.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
10 RFIs per million construction cost. Now, do the math.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, too, they went back and they asked the architects, how much time do you spend answering RFIs? Now, this is only the architects.
Mm-hmm.
The average was 8 hours per RFI. Times 800.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You clearly didn't make a profit on that one.
Correct. That's a lot of man hours.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because if they just took the time to do it, then you wouldn't be in, like, you know what I mean? It's all about correcting the drawings. Like I have, dedicated checklists for all different stages in the project. When it goes out to building permit, this is the stuff that has to be on there, your code, your exiting, your washroom count, etc. And then it just kind of evolves from there. And then you go out for tender and you have to go through that. And I go, when I would do a tender check, basically I would print off my drawings in the 24 set, have my checklist, and I'd redline, bleed all over it and go through every item, even though I'm like, oh, I know it's on there. I know it doesn't matter. Go double check it, because it's easier now to fix it versus dealing with that RFI scenario that you just listed. And same thing, in the last episode, I was talking about dimensions. If, it takes 2 seconds, click, dimensions done. If you don't do that, take that extra effort, that dimension's about a half an hour to do it later because of the process and the paperwork and that follows. So yeah, spend your time. I guess if that's anything from this podcast today, is just spend your time. Do your due
Early.
diligence early.
Because
Well, that's a good question too. When do you guys want to come in and do specs on a job?
well, as soon as possible. But
Like design
let's
development?
that'd be fantastic. Schematic design would be even better.
Day one would be best.
Day one.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to step back a minute on that RFI question. I think if there's a rush at the end of a project, and it seems like every project is facing that rush.
Yeah.
If a lot of RFIs, I think, could be prevented prior to construction even starting, if the project team reviewed each other's drawings. I can't tell you how many times I'm nearly 100% certain that our specs went out without anyone ever looking at them. Now, in my opinion, they're correct. However, you're the project architect or project designer. You know what is correct and what is not correct. That RFI was probably generated because I misunderstood something you told me, or you didn't verify that what I put in was what you really wanted. I put in what I heard you wanted. So I think a lot of RFIs can be prevented by just spend that extra day. Don't tell me you want your specs on Friday when it's due Friday. Tell me you want them on Wednesday. And then you look at them Thursday. Tell me Thursday night what you want changed, and I'll get that changed out. Hopefully it's not a lot, but review it. And that's part of why I think our software, I'm going to go back to that for just a minute, but we encourage you to comment on the specifications as they're being developed so that we can prevent that RFI. And now jumping to the next part, when do we want to get involved? Schematic design would be fantastic.
Yep.
And I'll let Dave talk a little bit about his favorite saying with schematic design.
My favorite saying? Okay, but I said day one, and the reason is the way that we look at specifications are really two types. Okay, and we're promoting the use of uniformat early on in a project, but uniformat, the way it can be developed, can span the life of the project. So it doesn't have to be only early. But uniformat is a great way to capture owner project requirements, capture system and assemblies descriptions, start to build out what those assemblies are as you learn what they are, as design decisions are being made. Because Steve is getting really anxious for me to say it, is we want to say what you know when you know it. Let's not make stuff up, because as soon as you make stuff up, the estimator is going to price it, and then we're going to be chasing bogus information with a bogus price and exceeding a project budget. Nobody's going to really know why. So if we can treat the specifications much like you treat a building model and develop it in a level of development just like you would in building model, and we can actually define, use the same kinds of definitions when you're talking about a spec to say these are the levels of information that we think are appropriate. And we can do that in a uniformat-based spec because, hey, we don't have to know that it's a brick cladding on the building to be able to specify an exterior wall. Right? But if we're going to write a construction spec, we do need to know that it's brick to be able to select the right section to even be able to start the spec.
Right.
So there's that disconnect too. And see, now you got me on a roll here because this is one of my passions, Matt. So bear with me. Uniformat has the distinct feature that, number one, it was designed by estimators. Every family, talking about Revit, every family that you place in Revit is an assembly.
Right.
So now, if you have the estimate, a description, and the model, all aligned 1 to 1 to 1 because they're all systems and assemblies. Now the analysis of the estimate and the comparison to the budget and balancing the project costs to be able to keep things in line is far easier.
You could say you have true value engineering at that point.
Yeah, because now you can make decisions early to keep everything in balance and avoid what we know as value engineering today, which is really cost or scope cutting.
Right. Now, one thing when you're saying like, oh, about the brick, when we have this item and then it applies, at the end of the day, that's you kind of driving that, because then that's all about experience and, being so many years and doing this and going through the challenges and the stories and all that kind of stuff. What's a podcast without the topic of AI? It's everywhere and you see, but is there any kind of tools that you see today or where you see it going that can basically go, oh, I've got this wall, therefore bang, 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 everything needs to be applied to it. This rate coding, this rate caulking, this air gap, whatever the case is. Do you see that kind of where things may go? Maybe an opportunity?
Funny you mentioned that.
This was all improv too, so.
Yeah. No, we've done some experiments, and I know some other specifiers who have as well, and the stuff that comes out of AI is not a specification. It's not. It's lacking in a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
And the other component that could help us is we found out that what's the proper way to say it? I guess it's choking on the information because it can't read a drawing.
Yeah,
it can see the words in a drawing,
mm-hmm.
but it can't really interpret what those symbols are.
Yeah, and this is today. It's not there. We know that. Correct. But down the road, maybe. I don't know. It'd be interesting. It would get. I've had the arguments at CSI conferences where someone's like, well, you're just going to model it and then hit one button and it's going to produce all the details. And I'm like, AI is not going to do that. It's going to go grab residential details, and it's just not. It would open up the door for extra because the details are just not there. And best practices and climate change and where you're being built.
And one of the concerns too is, do you want to go out in a public domain with AI, especially if you're dealing with projects that are sensitive, mm-hmm. that are under NDA because of what they are. And many of our projects today are under NDA, that we're not even, mm-hmm. we can't talk about them by name. We can't, in many cases, even tell you who the architect is. So if that's the case, you're really forced to be using either your own data set as part of AI, which is now somewhat limited because you only have so much experience, and AI is the advantage is let's take advantage of everybody's experience, mm-hmm. but you really don't have that if you're in a closed data set.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's only going to determine what it knows there and the data there. So if it's being fed wrong data, then that's kind of like what Part 3's AI tool, where it reviews shop drawings, because it's just looking at what's noted in the specs versus when a shop drawing comes in, just as a quick cross comparison. And it's very cool because it's black and white. But in that case, what we're talking and what you're saying, Dave, is it's subject, right? It's very subjective to what it can be, and all it's not 1 + 1. It's A + B = C squared, or whatever the case is. It has a variety to it. There's my physics of the day.
I think you have to be careful too for using it for what you're saying too, Matt, is if because of the nature of shop drawings, a lot of times when you get product data in, if you're looking for it to compare some items that are in the spec versus what's on the product data sheet, a lot of product data sheets have multiple products listed with them. So you may list a certain testing, I'm going to use ASTM, a certain ASTM number, and it may see that ASTM number in that product data sheet, but it may not apply to that product that you are looking for.
Right.
So in a way, you have to be kind of careful of what you're asking it to do as well.
Agreed. Like you're the one that's the driver. You're the professional. So therefore, yes, it can be a tool to help you. But
Yes.
yeah, and like, when it comes to, the podcast, like I use AI to make up my show notes, do the blog posts. I take all that and it's pretty cool, but I still check it and go through it. Cause sometimes you're like, no, I don't like that. I don't know. Just go back and you modify it. It's a tool, but, it'll be really interesting to see where it goes. Post every day.
Yeah.
People are commenting and seeing what, are you scared or you're not? Diary of CO put a big post out there, lots of comments, and just interesting to see what the world is. Are you scared of it or you're wanting to embrace it? Is it a new tool? Is it not? But at the end of the day, you're still the creator. You're the one that's driving the bus, and it's not the machine. The machine's a tool. That's all it's there for. The hammer's not going to make the house. You're going to do it.
And the experience I have, I try to use AI for writing Microsoft Word macros. After I just got done telling you earlier that we're trying to avoid those. But it's generating macros that are not error-free. So you still need to check and prompt the AI to go back and correct the errors that it built into the macros.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered one. I asked it to do something. It could not get it. And I was determined that AI was going to fix this. And it wasn't all of that difficult of a problem. So I probably spent 45 minutes trying to coax AI by different prompts to be able to fix this macro to actually complete it correctly. And I finally gave up, and I spent a couple of minutes and I was done. So there, where you think it may be saving time and energy, and in the end, in this one case, I couldn't even rely on it to finish it and get it right. So I had to take it over and do it myself.
Can we back up a minute, Matt? We never really finished a discussion that we went off on a tangent, which often happens, which is good.
Yep.
But you had mentioned earlier about precedence and precedence clauses, as far as specs take precedence over drawings.
Yep.
And that's a very, there used to be something in the AIA contract documents that had a precedence. And they fixed that a few years ago. I think it was 2017 with the new issue of the A201 document. But there are no precedents between drawings and specifications. They're to be viewed equally per the contract language now with AIA. So really, there is no specs take precedence over this or this. What they instruct us to do. Go ahead.
Unless it's a custom contract, and we see that a lot in institutional and public owners, where they have their own, and they very well may have an order of precedence.
Yeah,
right.
But generally speaking, there's no precedence, and that's an unfortunate side effect of that is that generates an RFI, because there's a disconnect, and I mentioned that before. There's a disconnect between the drawing and the specification. So that final review of both documents is very important. That often doesn't happen.
So, and here's the side effect of order of precedence. So if you set an order of precedence, if specs do overrule drawings, which is the proper way it should be anyhow, because everybody knows specs are more important. But and I probably will find all the hate email in my inbox soon after you publish.
We'll link it to your inbox. Absolutely. For inquiries, contact Dave at this.
Yes, exactly. So the side effect is that with an order of precedence, there really is no conflict. Mm-hmm. So if specs take precedence and the drawings and the specs don't match, the contractor has every right to rely on the spec.
Right.
And no need to ask a question, because the order of precedence solved the problem.
And that's how I was always kind of taught to, that's where you go. And that's what they would look at that and it would eliminate the RFIs because they should be just going to that as the final word. And then, like I said, if your specs aren't tight, that's where you're going to get into problems.
Well, let's say your specs are tight. Your specs say exactly what you think they're supposed to say.
Mm-hmm.
Say I specify an EPDM roof, but they really wanted a TPO roof. You got that's a black and white difference in most instances.
Yeah.
And not just in the material color.
Right. That's where I was going. Anyway, but those are two different materials that have two different costs and could be put down in two different ways. But I had it specified the opposite of what you really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a potential change order in the mix there.
Yeah. No, that's right. And like when it comes to enforcement and shop drawings and, all in terms of that CA phase, listers know I don't like alternates. How do you guys feel with that? Like something comes out on site and the contractor tries to slip something beside you, you've spent this time writing the specs. You guys kind of prone to entertaining it, or it's just a flat out go away, follow what I just, I did.
It really depends on the architect or the designer of record, what they want. And that's a point of contention sometimes because I don't always get direction on submittals. So if I'm not certain, I don't want to say this in a negative way, but I could cause you a lot of heartache in a way because I could request a ton of submittals that you have to spend a lot of time reviewing in CA, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm unsure of the product, I'm going to ask for a few more submittals to make sure that's exactly what you want. But that's another point where the architect really needs to review the specifications because shop drawings are such an important part of the process. Some of them, if I list 3 products and you're okay with it as an architect for those 3 products, if they submit that product, why do you need anything else? Just send me a note. Say, I'm using what you wanted me to use. This is the product I'm using in this section. You're done. You just saved yourself hours of time, right?
That's right. You don't need. I always love when you mention samples. The office would show up at the door, and we got a sample for you, Matt. Okay, and it'd be a big piece of like metal standing seam roof, and you're like, I don't need a piece of this. We know what it looks like. Thank you for sending. Yes, I know the color is iron gray. I know the color. Thank you. What do we do?
That's look at it from our perspective. We wanted you to look at that piece of metal because that was the color you told us when you told us.
That's right.
Did your mind change, or did the owner change their mind between when you told us and when it was let out for bid?
Yeah.
Or tender. No, sorry. I'm coming to terms with the differences between North and South here. Bid tenders.
Yeah.
So let's go the other way, though.
Oh boy.
Yes, because I made a trip over to an architect's office. They were actually working on at that time. It was the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I walk into the architect's office and there's a gigantic crate sitting out just outside the lobby door. So I'm asking, so what's in the crate? Oh, that's a sample of the curtain wall for the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. I said, well, the building's already under construction at this point. It's like, you going to look at it? Because the crate wasn't even open. It was all nailed still, it was the shipping crate. No, we're not going to open it. I was like, wait a minute. You've got this full scale sample that you asked me to specify, and you're not even going to open the crate to look at it? No. So they didn't. I took the sample. We had it sitting in our office.
Nice. I just imagined, like as you said, the crate and it was there. The flashes, the Christmas Story, right? Mm-hmm. The old classic Christmas Story, the lamp.
Yes, the light lamp.
I just imagine you just opening it up and it says fragile. Just this imagine, but yeah, that's quite interesting. I got one of those samples too, and what the heck?
But I mean, that sample, you just think about it. It's one sample. This probably cost something like $10,000 to build this sample.
It was not
a small sample.
It was not small.
Oh, jeez.
It was like 6-inch deep curtain wall with full glazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was probably about a 4-foot by 4-foot sample.
That's a good, wow. That is a really decent size.
Yeah.
So where is it now?
Dumpster.
Recycle.
Yeah.
But
you don't get
think
all these
about it.
samples and start building something with them, do you?
No.
No.
Actually, you can, because a friend of mine actually took a bunch of those 12 by 12 insulated glass samples.
Yep.
And incorporated that into the exterior wall of his house when he built it as a bunch of little 12 by 12 windows.
That's cool.
Pretty neat little idea, but only an architect would do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sometimes I look, I'm like, there's quite a bit of material. We can make a doghouse out of this or something. It'll be the most creative doghouse of samples and, this product. And why not?
So you need to be careful what you're specifying, what you're asking. If you don't need it, let's not torture the contractor and the subcontractors. Let's not have the owner pay for something that's really unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And that goes with the submittals, the samples, anything else.
Everything. Yeah. And as far as alternates go, I mean, if you're really in doubt, the alternates are great and can be very beneficial. And I think that's where you were coming from at one point. But also on the flip side too, you can use unit prices to do the same thing. For different types of materials that, hey, we want it. This is really what we want. But if it comes in too much money, can we swap it out for this other thing that we know is a lot less expensive that we approve of?
Yep. And I wanted to touch on a point about enforcing that, and you kind of just answered it right there, Steve. Is you as the architect is enforcing it. The spec writer's on the job that you're pushing. If the contractor's saying, "Well, no, I'm going to do this," well, no, you guys are specs. This is what, like I said, this is why we designed. We've done this. And therefore, we're just going to stick to the plan. And we're not going to go to some other third-party application, alternate, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. At least that's kind of the way I'm taking it too, right? So, but if you do get that pushback, how do you handle it?
And pushback from whom? Because right now we're only dealing with the architects, really.
That's true.
We don't deal with the contractors unless the architect brings us in to ask.
Yeah, but the pushback is likely to depend on whether or not it's privately bid project or publicly bid project. Yeah. So privately bid, the architects, the owners can do whatever they want. They don't have to accept anything as an alternative or a substitution. Publicly bid, you don't have the same kind of control because it has to be open. It has to be available to anybody that can prove that they can meet the spec. Mm-hmm. So it's far harder to enforce to get exactly what it is that you specify on a publicly bid project.
Unless there's a specific set of criteria that will make or break that material. and the other company can't meet that criteria.
Right. But then you have to be careful, too, that you haven't created a proprietary spec that's masquerading as a performance or descriptive spec, because then that becomes subject of a potential bid challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that becomes intent or letter versus or letter of the spec, or what's your intention at the end of the day?
Yeah. And that's up to interpretation, right?
That's right. Hence going back to the cookie recipe. And, it was, do you believe everything you read? I don't know.
I don't like butter. I like margarine.
Oh boy. Now you're opening up the date.
Yeah.
Dave, what were you using in this? What were you using in the recipe when you're making it? Was it butter or margarine?
Did you follow the directions? There's the question.
There is the question.
I was supposed to bake those? I just ate them raw. You said chocolate chip, right?
Yeah, chocolate chip, absolutely.
I put it in my vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
You just did it all together. That's right.
And you didn't have enough left for the cookies, so they were just whatever they were without chocolate chips.
No, yeah. In the end, the audience was satisfied, and we all live from there. Right. So, here's your, as we're kind of coming up to the hour here, let's, and wrapping this up, lots of good takeaways, contradictory points. This is awesome. And thank you for that. Thanks for being on the show for this. So your soapbox question, right? If you could change one industry-wide misconception about specifications, what would it be and why? Who wants to go first? Who's brave? Who's the brave one that wants to go first?
You want it, Steve? Go ahead.
I'll take a crack at it. I think the biggest misconception is that specifications are interchangeable and they can be used on multiple different projects at multiple different times without any review or anything by anybody. If I could change it, I would say that we, as specifiers, we don't like to be mushrooms. There's a common joke around the specifying community that we're treated like mushrooms. We're kept in the dark and we're fed a lot of. Bring us out of the dark. Treat us like an equal on the team. We will help you if you help us. We can help you make your project much better. Maybe not much better. We can help you make your project better by helping you be informed of materials. Like I was saying earlier before we started that, I was here visiting with product reps. I have contacts that you might not have, that if you don't know what you want, I can put you in touch with somebody that can get you what you want. And it can make your project a little bit better for yourself and for the owner. Ultimately, we're all working for the owner, right? We want the owner to have the project they want at the end. Let us help you. There's my soapbox.
Yeah, well said.
I have a different take.
Go for it,
All
Dave.
right. So misconceptions. You think about construction specifications, and the first thing everybody thinks about is CSI format, master format, 6-digit section numbering, and 50 divisions. And I'm saying that's not all that's available. So I'm going back to uniformat. That can be a specification too. Do we need the traditional construction specifications for everything? My answer is no, we do not. So we can write an entire project specification using uniformat. If we really need the traditional construction specs, let's plug them in where we need them, but only where we need them. And I think if we looked at projects in this kind of a way, that we might see the specification volume shrink dramatically. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I really believe that enforcement and understanding will be much simpler. So if you had, and we proved this on one project where I delivered a uniformat-based architectural spec only for a cancer infusion center. 25 pages was the total architectural spec. It was built from that. I had no questions about the spec during construction. It's possible.
Very interesting. Yeah. I'm used to books about very large.
Yes, and why? Why do we have them? Why are they so large? Is it really necessary?
Yeah, it just to cover your bases. Dotting the I's, crossing the T's. Like one example, and I don't want to take away from the moment that your moment and everything, but like it was a curtain wall. We didn't have the anti-twisting blocking in there. It wasn't called up in the specs, and it was an extra. So less is more. Maybe that's kind of the theory to kind of say with what you're getting at.
Yeah. So yeah, following on for me's, less is more.
Less is more. Yeah.
I'll quote another famous person, Jerry Maguire. help us help you.
Nice. No, that's awesome. That's the best. There we go. Mic drop from Steve. He got the award for that. Less is more. Let me help you out. Exactly. Where can the audience find you guys? I know you already told where you're located right now there, Steve, but where can they find you on the social sides?
Don't call me in Omaha. I'm not here after tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right. But LinkedIn, this is your plug. Where can they find you? Where can they reach out?
They can always find us on our website, conspectusinc.com. It has all of our team members listed there. Just go to the About Us page, and you'll be able to find all of us with all of our contact information.
Yeah. And please reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Dave and I both love talking specs. We're just kind of geeks that way, but other people in the firm are the same way. Yeah. Even if it's a simple question, hey, how would I do this? Even if you're not a client, call us up, ask us a question. I'll take a few minutes to help explain specs to somebody.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of testament of truth, even you're at the conferences, and on top of that, you're leading classes. I really thoroughly enjoyed the design build spec class that we did with the Lego that you brought to Houston last year. That was that was awesome. It's in my heart for life and everything, because I so enjoyed that. It was a good analogy and a different perspective and a take on that type of world and how to kind of wrap that up and tying all back to the specs and the different types that you can do.
Yeah. And that was really fun to kind of pull together. That was a collaborative effort between Dave and myself and Charlie Dunn, another gentleman that you should probably talk to at some point.
Yeah.
I'll get you in touch with him.
Yeah,
he'd be great for you. But
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's always fun to teach about specs.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. This was an absolute pleasure. It was a blast. Can't wait to be in person again at the next conference. And there's lots of them are coming up, so I'm sure we'll be there and do it again. Absolutely.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah,
please. And you're coming back on our podcast eventually too.
Yes. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, and deliberate words, let's do it. Absolutely. So after I'm off to Europe in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be back, and then let's schedule it in and put in the books, because I can't wait. It'll be so
I hope it's
fun.
a pleasure trip.
It is. It's going to be exploring everything. It's been
awesome.
22 years on the book. I've been planning this one for a long time, so it's time to kick it off as a bucket list item.
Are you taking the Jeep with you to do some trail blazing?
That would be cool, but not in this case.
Okay.
But we will be going to the Omaha, Juneau beaches and doing the whole D-Day landing.
Oh, nice.
Very passion of mine, 100%.
All right.
So,
we'll have to talk about that sometime.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely bring that. We'll connect into your show, and after I get back from the trip,
sounds good.
We'll go into that. But yeah, well, that wraps up this week's episode. Architects, keep designing, and contractors, keep making those blueprints into reality. We'll see you on the next one.